These days, the president gets so much attention, it kind of makes you feel bad for his team. Because you know what? They're working really hard.
We have a wonderful group of people. We have a great cabinet. There are those people that say this is one of the best cabinets this country has ever had. I happen to agree.
I do agree. If they're so great, we should give them more attention. Forget Voldemort. Let's talk about the Death Eaters surrounding him. Because behind the scenes, they're the ones quietly getting scary shit done. And the best example of this is civil rights. From the moment Trump took office, his cabinet has been systematically dismantling civil rights policies. And in case you were homeschooled by David Duke, civil rights laws are good. They make it illegal to discriminate based on sex, race, or religion. In the 1950s and 1960s, civil rights laws essentially forced major government agencies to create internal offices dedicated to upholding civil rights in their departments. Agencies like Housing and Urban Development, Education, Health and Human Services, and the Justice Department. But now, the heads of these departments are not only failing to stand up for the people these laws were designed to protect, they're using their power to target vulnerable communities. Take the Department of Justice. Now, the DOJ sets the tone for the rest of the administration, and we all know Jeff Sessions, Trump's first attorney general, four-term senator from Alabama, and civil rights icon for completely the wrong reasons. In 1986, he was rejected to be a federal judge after people testified that he was a racist.
Thomas Figures, a black former assistant U.S. attorney in Alabama, testified Sessions called him boy and joked about the Ku Klux Klan. He thought Klan members were okay until he learned they smoked marijuana.
So he's cool with lynching as long as the nooses aren't made with hemp. Former colleagues even testified that Sessions often used the N-word, or as Sessions calls it, the N-I-G-G. He just says the word. He denied all of these allegations and insisted,
I am not a racist. I am not insensitive to blacks. I have supported civil rights activity in my state.
This clip is remarkable. Play it back again and watch this woman in the back. I have never seen racism give someone whiplash before. It was like prejudice at 100 miles per hour. Look. When it comes to upholding civil rights, Jeff Sessions just isn't your guy. It's like hiring Ryan Adams to DJ a quinceañera. It makes no sense given what we know. Now, even though Sessions was forced to resign last year, don't forget, he made a ton of legacy moves.
The Justice Department is now backing Ohio's method for purging voter rolls, a reversal from the Obama administration. But civil liberties groups say the process unfairly blocks eligible voters.
The Texas congressman suing the state over its strict voter ID law can no longer count the Department of Justice as a major ally in the case.
Not only did he order the Justice Department to back out of key voting rights cases, he essentially stopped enforcing voting rights altogether. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act outlaws racial discrimination at the polls. Past departments of justice have filed numerous suits to enforce Section 2. But the Sessions DOJ never filed a single suit to enforce it. Zero. I mean, come on, this is America. Racism is as integral to voting as stickers. But neglecting voting rights was just the start for Sessions.
The Trump Justice Department appears to be taking a hands-off approach to police reform, a major shift compared to actions under the Obama administration.
Sessions said he's reviewing the binding agreements, called consent decrees, the agency uses to force police in Ferguson, Baltimore, and elsewhere to reform their practices.
We can all agree a lot of police departments do a good job. But in cases where there is systemic abuse, consent decrees are a powerful tool the DOJ uses to step in and stop it. After the killings of Freddie Gray in Baltimore, Michael Brown in Ferguson, and Laquan McDonald in Chicago, all of those cities and many others across the country agreed to consent decrees. But Sessions heard the word consent, and he's like, not on my watch.
When the Trump administration began, then Attorney General Sessions ordered a review of all the consent decrees that the DOJ had entered into with law enforcement around the country. And as Sessions packed up his office, he signed a memorandum adding 3 new requirements to any future consent decrees.
Jeff Sessions made it harder to use consent decrees as he was packing up his office. That was on his to-do list? Like, what was his last day like? Like, all right, man, I gotta pack up my stuff, turn in my key card. What am I forgetting? Oh, yeah. I gotta make it easier for rogue police officers to plant evidence, engage in cover-ups, and pistol whip people. Now, regardless of how you feel, a police force accountable to no one is only good for minorities if you're Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. Look, if you haven't seen Bad Boys, do yourself a favor. Take 9 hours and watch it on TNT. It's pretty incredible. Between voting rights and consent decrees, Sessions deployed a key tactic the Trump administration uses to undermine civil rights. It's something policy experts call not doing shit. Not doing shit is a constant theme because not enforcing civil rights is the same thing as not having civil rights laws at all. You can see this across departments. Ben Carson is the king of not doing shit. He's the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, which oversees 4.6 million households that receive rental assistance. Now, look, we all know Ben Carson's deal. He's like your uncle who never got married and then filled that emptiness with insane theories.
Poverty, to a large extent, is also a state of mind.
The likelihood of Hitler being able to accomplish his goals would have been greatly diminished if the people had been armed. A lot of people who go into prison straight, and when they come out, they're gay. So did something happen while they were in there? Ask yourself that question.
What the fuck? What is Ben Carson's logic? Look, I've seen a bunch of babies come out of women, but I've never seen one go in. What happened in there? Ask yourself that question. No, listen, hey, listen. I'm on CNN. When you go to sleep, it's dark outside. But when you wake up, it's light outside. So, did something happen out there? Ask yourself that question. I get why we all love making fun of Ben Carson. He's slow, he's sleepy. He's like the sloth from Zootopia. But we can't let that distract us from the fact that Carson is doing real damage to real lives. That's not funny. Just like that sloth wouldn't be funny if you found out Jussie Smollett recently Venmo'd him. You know what? We had a graphic of Jussie Smollett getting attacked by the sloth from Zootopia, and we cut it. And I'm glad we did, because that groan was very indicating of the previous joke. Now, as HUD secretary, a big part of Carson's job is enforcing the Fair Housing Act, which outlaws discrimination against anyone buying or renting a home. But Carson has dialed back investigations, rolled back Obama-era anti-segregation rules, and the most astonishing thing is this. In his 2 years at HUD, Carson has used his power to launch investigations into housing discrimination a total of 1 time. To put that in perspective, Ben Carson launched an investigation looking into housing discrimination the same number of times he tried to stab his friend Bob. You're the only one that knows this, so please Google it. Carson's policies are doing real damage.
The current administration is slowly chipping away at laws intended to promote equal opportunity when it comes to renting and owning homes. Housing advocates warn this policy is going to result in communities basically failing to fight discrimination.
It's not just housing. The administration is also failing to fight discrimination in schools, which have always been a flashpoint for racial discrimination and a place of historic progress. Think of Brown v. Board of Education, right? School integration led the way for racial equality in so many parts of American life. But now, we've entrusted that legacy of progress to Betsy DeVos. Just look at how she connects with her fans, you guys.
I've been on the job now for some time, and I came into office with a core belief. It is the inalienable right and responsibility of parents.
I know what you're wondering, but the answer is no. Spike Lee did not direct that. Yo, I love the cameraman for this one. Where they're like, look, Bob, you gotta stay tight. He's like, fuck it, I'm cutting to a Y. I'll deal with the repercussions later. Under DeVos, the Department of Ed has put a halt on 1,200 civil rights probes started under Obama. One story that illustrates the harm of revoking these policies is the case of Tre'Vasia Jackson.
Tre'Vasia Jackson got hot glue on a classmate's arm during a school project. Although the injured student's family chose not to press charges, Tre'Vasia was arrested. Juvenile hall staff patted her down, cut off her hair extensions, and locked her up for 3 days. She served 6 more days of suspension, then 12 days in an alternative school.
And she's only 13 years old.
For years, the Department of Education has been investigating Trevasia School District for punishing black students way harder than white students. Under DeVos, that case was closed, along with 65 other investigations, many of which were trying to combat racial disparities in school discipline. Trevasia Jackson's case is not an isolated incident. Black students are 15.5% of public school students, but account for nearly 40% of suspensions. The Obama administration put guidelines in place because kids who were suspended and expelled were less likely to graduate. Those are the facts. And here's what Betsy DeVos did with them.
You still haven't talked about the issue in public schools as it relates to black and brown students and the high disparity rates as it relates to suspensions and expulsions.
I'm very proud of the record of the Office for Civil Rights in continuing to address issues that arise to that level.
But you're taking away $1 million from the Office of Civil Rights.
The team and the Office for Civil Rights is doing an amazing job. They're able to do more with less.
Betsy's like, look, we're just embracing minimalism like Marie Kondo. Civil rights it's not sparking joy for me. These cuts are about rolling back civil rights enforcement. It's part of a second tactic that the administration employs in their assault on civil rights: undoing shit. They love undoing shit, especially Obama civil rights shit. Just look at the Federal Commission on School Safety. After the Parkland school shooting, Betsy DeVos was put in charge of this commission to investigate ways to keep students safe at school. Pretty straightforward.
Will your commission look at the role of firearms as it relates to gun violence in our schools?
That is not part of the commission's charge, per se.
So you're studying gun violence, but not considering the role of guns.
We're actually studying school safety and how we can ensure our students are safe at school.
When that school safety report came out, it said next to nothing about keeping guns out of school. How do you investigate a school shooting without talking about guns? That's like investigating 9/11 and not bringing up the date. You're like, look, there was this event. It was in the fall. I can't tell you what month it was, but some traumatic stuff happened. The report said one of the ways to make schools safer was to end Obama-era policies on school discipline. So the Department of Education somehow managed to use a school shooting to come up with a policy that hurts black and brown kids. The leaps she's making here are incredible. She went from school shootings have to stop, to guns aren't the problem, to school discipline is the problem, to let's punish brown kids in school more. Even James Harden would call traveling on that. Now look, a lot of the Death Eaters I've talked about are characters you know, but there is one you have probably never heard of.
Hello, my name is Roger Severino, and I am the director of the Office for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
I know Roger Severino looks like he's constantly hanging out in the tarantula section of PetSmart, but he is very important. Remember how we said each agency has its own civil rights division? Severino is the guy who heads up the Civil Rights Division for HHS, a $90 billion agency responsible for protecting the health of all Americans, which means everything from checking food and drug safety to regulating health insurance markets. But Severino seems to have a singular focus.
There are now 60 different gender identities. It's hard to judge where some law is going to be drawn. So different school districts are addressing it in different ways. They should be free to address it at the local level. However, we don't need a federal rule saying that boys must be allowed in the girls' locker rooms.
Since becoming head of civil rights at HHS, Severino's been pushing an agenda that discriminates against trans people, which isn't unusual in the Trump administration. And in case you don't know, here's their rough logic.
Today, you feel like a woman, even though everything about you genetically says that you're a man, or vice versa. Wouldn't that be the same as if you woke up tomorrow morning after seeing a movie about Afghanistan or reading some books and you say, you know what, I'm Afghanistan.
Don't laugh at Ben Carson. He was ruined by American politics. Technically, he is Afghanistan. Under the guise of civil rights, Severino is trying to deny an entire group of people legal protection, which is insane. But it's not insane if you've been to his office. Apparently, the only two decorations in his office are a crucifix, and I swear I am not making this up, a Clarence Thomas bobblehead. Severino has definitely kissed that bobblehead on the mouth. No photos of his family. It's just Roger and Clarence straight up mouth kissing. Under federal law, it is illegal to restrict access to healthcare based on gender identity. But Severino thinks that that threatens religious freedom. So he's figured out a way to allow healthcare providers to legally discriminate.
The Department of Health and Human Services announced the creation of the Conscience and Religious Freedom Division within its Office of Civil Rights.
We see that healthcare is the next area where the issues of conscience and the issues of life and death are coming to the fore.
The new division at HHS will make it easier for doctors, nurses, and other health providers to opt out of services that violate their moral or religious beliefs.
So if you're a doctor who doesn't like trans people or gay people or a woman's right to choose, you don't have to do anything that violates your religious beliefs, even if someone's life depends on it. I cannot believe that you get this moral out, even though what you're doing is completely immoral. And it's all happening with the support of a massive government agency. This gets at the third and final tactic the administration uses to ruin civil rights: doing awful shit. Denying someone care is objectively awful, but according to the Trump administration, it's a civil right.
They have set up a new agency to discriminate against LGBT people and women. This is about pediatricians refusing to treat children because they have gay parents. This is about transgender people being turned away from emergency rooms and doctors' offices.
By cherry-picking which civil rights they're enforcing and which ones they're not, they are redefining who is a protected class in America. Everything we've talked about tonight raises one question. Who counts in America? This isn't just a metaphorical question. I'm not high. It's about to be a very literal one.
The 2020 census is creating some controversy. The Trump administration wants to include a question about citizenship status.
19 states and the District of Columbia plan to sue to block the question. Opponents say it will discourage immigrants from filling out the census.
How did you make something as boring as the census racist? Honestly, props to them. They can make anything racist. I bet they're in a lab right now figuring out how to make stamps offensive. Oh, come on, man, just don't put the Confederate flag next to Neil Armstrong. Don't do him like that. Now, I know it doesn't seem like it, but the 2020 census is one of the most important civil rights issues of our time. Everything we've talked about tonight, equal opportunity, equal access, equal treatment, is affected by the census. The Constitution says to count every single person in America, citizen or not, men, women, children, O.J. Simpson. Yes, even O.J. Simpson counts. The census is important because it determines how nearly $700 billion is distributed to states. That's money for roads, schools, housing, healthcare, you know, everything Paul Ryan thinks about so he doesn't come too fast. The census, he really focuses. He's like, come on, urban development. The census also determines apportionment. That's the number of seats in the House of Representatives that each state gets. The problem is that historically, minorities have been undercounted by a lot. That means they get less money and less political representation. And the citizenship question will only make that worse.
We know from all the available evidence that redistricting on the basis of citizens and not persons will dramatically shift power away from urban communities, away from minorities, and toward white rural voters.
The bottom line is, if you live somewhere like a city with undocumented people or with immigrants, and they don't get counted, your community gets less money and less political representation. And that is exactly what the Trump administration is hoping for. This is a power grab, plain and simple. And the person put in charge of the census is Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, who definitely looks like the old guy who refuses to use a towel in the YMCA locker room. He just looks like that dude. You're like, cover it up, and he's like, fuck it, man. It is what it is. He's also obsessed with money.
Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross was snapped wearing velvet opera slippers with the Commerce Department's insignia on them. Custom-made ones like this cost upwards of $500.
He spent $500 on velvet slippers is something you read in a rapper's bankruptcy filing. Say what you want about Wilbur Ross, but he does get noticed.
White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders pushed back yesterday on a report the president has lost faith
in Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, partly because he, quote, keeps falling asleep in meetings.
So the guy highlighted that is 79-year-old Wilbur Ross caught napping during the president's big speech in Saudi Arabia.
Come on, man, he's already got the slippers. Just give him PJs and a sleepy cap, okay? Let Grandpa go to bed. He's tired. Wilbur Ross tried to cook the books of the census, and he did it in the most incompetent way imaginable. In 2018, when Congress found out that the Trump administration wanted to add a citizenship question to the census, it demanded answers.
Can you tell me whether the Department of Commerce plans to include the citizenship question in the 2020 census?
Department of Justice, as you know, initiated the request for inclusion of the citizenship question.
Keep in mind, he said the request came from the Department of Justice, but it came out that in 2017, in an email, he asked an aide why nothing has been done in response to my request that we include a citizenship question. He might as well have written, Wendy, what's the status report on the crimes I'm committing? He lied to Congress because he needed a legit reason to ask the citizenship question. So he told them it didn't come from him. It came from the Department of Justice. Now, I get that strategy. We all do this at work. You divert blame. You do that at the bank. 100%. You work in banking. You know how shady shit works. But here's where Wilbur Ross really shit his opera slippers. He said the reason the DOJ wanted the question was so they could uphold Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Remember Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act? That ensures there is no voting discrimination. The thing Jeff Sessions has enforced 0 times. All of a sudden, the Trump administration now cares about it. That'd be like if Elon Musk admitted, I made some promises I couldn't keep. You would know something would be up. And something is definitely up with the census.
This lawsuit and the documents that have been released as part of it has shown that the Trump administration officials, including Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross,
who oversees the Census
Bureau, exactly. He was looking at documents, articles, and discussing not about the Voting Rights Act. In the earliest documents that were released, he was discussing apportionment.
The citizenship question was never about enforcing the Voting Rights Act or even about finding out who is and isn't a citizen. It was always about scaring immigrants so Republicans can shift political power and federal dollars to their voters. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear the case in April and will rule on it in June. And if the administration wins, they could skew the electoral map for the next 10 years. Do you know how long 10 years is? That's how long Modern Family has been on. Manny was a little kid during the last census. Yeah, it's adorable, but by the next census, he's gonna be a washed-up SoundCloud rapper with face tats. We are living through a dangerous time for civil rights in this country. Think of all the institutions that are under assault that we've talked about and all the lives that it will affect. Whether it's the Justice Department or housing or education or health and human services, it all comes together with the census. We clearly see that lives are being manipulated for political gain. The tactics the administration uses to erode civil rights are simple. Not doing shit, undoing shit, and doing awful shit. This is their holy trinity. They know exactly what they're doing. They're not stupid, except for Wilbur Ross. He's a complete idiot. Remember, Trump's Death Eaters are constantly working behind the scenes. And as always, the most vulnerable Americans will be the ones who suffer the most.